Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Friday, March the 8th, 2024. It is currently 4:30 p.m. Central Time, and I am coming to you live from the Theology Central studio, located right here in Abilene, Texas. If you have a Bible, open it up to the Gospel of John. We're going to look at two sections in the Gospel of John, and then hopefully we're going to have an interesting discussion, and then I'm going to give you an assignment. So we're going to look at two passages, briefly maybe say a few things about those passages, then we're going to look at something, have a conversation, and then I'm going to hand you an assignment. I almost did this for the Bible Pop Quiz podcast series because I think this would have worked for that, but doesn't really matter what we're calling it. Doesn't matter which series this shows up in. The point is, I'm going to give you something that I think will be very important to do. Hopefully you will actually participate. So you may want to grab something to write with, a notebook, a piece of paper, because hopefully this will be fun, helpful, and challenging. Are you ready? Let's begin in the Gospel of John, chapter 15. The Gospel of John, chapter 15, where we read these words. First, we'll start in verse 18. John chapter 15, verse 18, we read these words. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If ye were of the world would love his own. But because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. You are not of the world. You are not of this world. You have been chosen out of this world. So there is an aspect. There is a sense where you as a Christian, you as a believer, you're not of this world. Now, a lot of times when Christians hear that they're not of this world, we very much reduce it to not being of this world, usually to very external things. Where we go, what we do, how we dress, what we watch, what we listen to. We tend to make it very external, but let me make it very clear. You can change up all the externals so that you give the impression that you are not of this world, and you can pat yourself on the back thinking, look at me, I'm so not of this world. But external, not being of this world, is not really what Jesus is referring to here. You are not of this world, and something far deeper, something far more meaningful than simply external dress, hair, makeup, lack thereof, jewelry, no jewelry, this kind of music, not this kind of music, these movies, not these kind of movies, playing cards, don't playing cards, going to the movie theater, don't go to a movie theater, not going to any place that sells alcohol, not drinking, all of that stuff. And we love to reduce this kind of conversation. You're not of this world, so you can't do this, and you can't go here, and you can't do that. Typically, it's what we tell teenagers. If you are a Christian, you're not of this world, therefore you don't do this, and you don't do this, and you don't do that. And yet you can find Christian young people who don't do all of those supposedly things that make them of the world, but you start listening to them, you start talking to them, and they sound very much of this world. Because we reduce this to an external thing, and I think it goes much deeper. The same concept. So let me read that again. John 15:19. If you were of the world would love his own, but because you are not of this world, but have I chosen you out of the world. You're not of this world. You've been chosen out of it. Now, look at John chapter 17. John chapter 17, we read we'll go to verse 14. John chapter 17, verse 14. Again, Jesus is speaking. I've given them thy word, and the world hath hated them because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. I pray not that thou shouldest take them out of the world, but thou should keep them from the evil. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Hey, they're not of the world. They've been chosen out of it, but I'm not asking you to take them out of it. So in a sense, we are in it, but we're not of it. In a sense, in one sense, we're out of it, but in the other sense, we are in it. We are in it because that's where we live our lives. We are in it. We live amongst it. We're in it. We're around it. but we're not of it. And it says this, that I pray that thou shouldest keep them from the evil. Not that they should be kept from the world. They should be kept from the evil of it, from the evil actions. And then it says this, sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth. It is God's word that separates us from the world. And again, we reduce it to the external. I think the fact that God has given us his word, and that is what separates us. That's what separates us from the world. Not so much in the external, but it should separate us in how we think. How we think. So, do you truly think differently than the world? Now, you can always find those extremes, right? You can look into the world and go, well, I obviously think different than an atheist, or I think different than a Satanist, or I think different. And you may find those groups and you may feel that but I'm just talking, you may find those groups and it'll make you feel somehow morally or spiritually superior. But I'm just talking on average. When you listen to the average people in the world talk, and then you listen to the average Christian talk, sometimes the thinking is far more in common than we want it to believe. Now, we may not dress or talk the way they talk. We may not use their language. There may be some things that we avoid, but it's an external difference. But when you really get down to listening to Christians talk, listen to Christians at a business meeting. Oh my goodness gracious. Some church business meetings, everything comes out. It's this arrogance and judgmental and condemning and selfishness and my way or no way. It's just sometimes you just want to be like, you know what, guys? We are so in the world, it's not even funny. We sound like we're in the world in our thinking. We sound like we're in the world in our motivation. We sound like we are in the world in so many different ways. And it is very true. Like you can go to church and look like you're not of this world. And then, the parents can walk away and let the kids start talking about the week at their house. And you'll be like, well, the parents sound like they're very much in the world. And not just them. The same is true of me. The same is true of you. So in what ways are you truly not of this world? In what ways are you're in it, but what ways are you kept from the evil of it? And God has given us his word, and he's given us our word, I think primarily first and foremost to impact our thinking, that we are to let this mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, Philippians 2. And that's all about how we think about ourselves, that we don't exalt ourselves, but we humble ourselves. We put others before ourselves. See, now that's really challenging if you're of the world or not. Love your enemy. Turn the other cheek. Pray for them that would persecute you and use you. See, now you're getting challenged. See, now you're not of this world. But so many times we forget all of that. So we hold grudges and we're unforgiving and we gossip and we slander and we backstab and we complain and we grumble and we're selfish and we put ourselves before other people and all we think about is ourselves and we don't care about anybody. So many times. Now we may try to wrap it up in robes of self-righteousness, but we are so much like this world. We're not of it. But the way we're not of it should start with how we think. Now, ultimately, we're not of this world because, we have been saved by faith alone, and God's righteousness has been imputed to our account. So positionally, we're not of this world. Practically, we're in it. But while we're in it, we're not to be of it and our thinking first and foremost. Now, am I saying that won't impact your external actions? I'm not saying that. I'm saying the focus has to stop being clean up the external. So we try to act like we're not of the world. And then over and over and over, the world sees that we're very much like them because our internal motivations, desires, and thinking manifest itself in some way, shape, or form. Now, I bring all of this up simply to lay the foundation for a little bit more conversation, and then I'm going to give you an assignment. Now, as many of you know, I say this all the time. I always have books all over the place. And a lot of times I end up getting lots of books, and I haven't had the time to really work through them. And whenever I see a book that I haven't had the time to work through, I always get bothered because I'm like, look, I paid money for that book, or someone sent me that book, and I better be doing something with that book. It may not always show up in a broadcast. but I better do something with it. I don't ever want to see a book in my house where I'm like, I never worked through that, took notes. I want to have always done something with every book that I possess to some, even if I disagree with it. I've worked my way through it. I've taken notes. I've done something with it. I've gotten something from it, right? Because a book on a shelf that you have not worked through, gone through in some meaningful way, there was no point in having the book other than to put it on the shelf so that you can appear smart. So many times I've seen sometimes it's Christian men or pastors like, oh, you got this book and this book and this book. And well, they've never really even finished it or did much with it. I'm like, well, what's the point of having the book, right? You got to do something with it. So I have this book called Spiritual Disciplines, How to Become a Healthy Christian, right? Now, this is one of those situations where I was purchasing something else, some other book. And it was like, hey, if you combine it with this, we'll give you a 20% discount or give you a 10%, or you can get this book for $2, one of those things. And so a lot of times I'll throw in some of those extra books just because I'm getting a discount. It can't hurt, right? I may not know anything about the book. I may 1000% think the book is heretical, but hey, it can't hurt, right? So this book has been laying around, and I did one broadcast where I took something from it. And so I was still looking through the book, again, Spiritual Disciplines, How to Become a Healthy Christian, right? It's a little small book, right? And I came to this page 16, and at the top of it, it's reorientation to God's reality. Reorientation to God's reality. So like, here's God's reality, and I need to be reoriented to his reality, because sometimes we so live in this world that we think and really feel and perceive according to the world's reality. But by faith, we are to see that which goes beyond this reality. So we have to reorient ourselves sometimes to God's reality, because whether we like it or not, we forget God's reality, and we see and we feel and we act and we think very much in accordance with this world's reality. Right? So we got to remember, I am not of this world. I, in a sense, been chosen out of it. But Jesus is not praying that they would be taken from inside it. They were to remain inside of it, but they were to be kept from the evil that is in the world. How are they to be kept from it? He has given us his word that sanctifies us. It sanctifies our thinking, so we're not thinking like this world. So I need to be reoriented to God's reality. Now, here's how the page begins. Before we know who to become, we must know what story we live in. So let me read that again. Before we know who to become, we must know what story we live in. We all depend on a narrative to make sense of our experience, because life is confusing, hard, and beautiful all at once. We depend on a narrative to try to make sense of our world, to try to make sense of it, because life can be confusing. It can be painful. It can be hard. It can be beautiful, but we all look for some kind of narrative to explain it, to understand it, right? Because we want to understand what we are and why we are. And a lot of times we try to, that narrative may be more focused on how you were raised. See, that narrative explains kind of what you are, and then you got to figure out what you want to become. And sometimes the narrative is more focused on, well, tell me about your mother. Tell me about your father. Tell me about your family. And yes, sometimes how we were raised and things we experience greatly determines a lot about how we see and feel things in the present. Sometimes maybe it has far more of an impact than we even want to admit. But there's a narrative. We have some narrative to try to explain life, to try to understand it, to try to explain maybe our shortcomings, our struggles, our failures, our doubts, our emotions. But as a Christian, the narrative that we should be looking to, well, is God's reality. God's reality should be the narrative, not necessarily. Now, these other things impact us, but they so impact us that we need to be reoriented back to God's reality, because we so perceive things based off this narrative that's been imposed upon our life. The book continues. I've known many people who have found their experiences too hard to bear, so they try to escape life altogether. Some cope with socially accepted or unacceptable addictions, make feelings their guide, or simply walk away from a faith never fully known. There is a reason strong leaders with a clear message gain crowds. We want purpose to make sense of the pain, so we look to someone willing to tell us a narrative that that just might fit. We want a narrative. We want a narrative. We want a narrative. Even though we may not be able to articulate this, even though we may not be able to clearly explain this to people, we want a narrative to help us deal with the complexities and the difficulties and the craziness of life. It's beauty, it's pain, it's mystery, it's ups and it's downs. We need a narrative. We need that. And so sometimes people will turn to anything to give them some kind of a narrative. So sometimes they will look to narrative maybe in themselves. They'll come up with, they'll maybe try to escape the narrative. So that's one way you try to escape the narrative. Maybe you try to create your own narrative. Maybe you look to a religion for a narrative. Maybe you look to a cult you can look to so many different sources. Now, for us as Christians, it's not that we should not be looking for a narrative. We should be looking for truth. That should be our narrative, as a pursuit of truth. But we could get into a discussion about that. All right, but here we go. They continue. People throughout history have promised a way. Read this again. People throughout history have promised a way to the good life. And that's true. There's always been someone coming along saying the way to the good life is this way. Get my book, do this, do that, do this, do that. They give you the steps. They give you because you need to get to the good life. Many of these older promises are still around, just in new wrapping. The new wrapping in today's time looks like social media, where the good life is constantly parading itself before our eyes. Scroll through Instagram, Facebook, or Amazon to see the promise of meaningful identity. Belonging and purpose can be found in, and I'm going to give you a number of, we'll call them, they're using the word narratives. We could refer to them as philosophical perspectives. We could look at these from different perspectives. So here's what we're going to do, all right? We are not of this world. That sometimes gets reduced to mere externals. We have to see not being of this world as something far deeper than the external. We clean up the outside. We are not to be of this world in how we think. God has given us his word to sanctify us. And that starts with our thinking. We think differently. But so many times we dress up the outside. We look like we're not of this world. But when you really dig past the facade and you pull away the mask, we're just like the world in our thinking and our hopes and our ambitions and our desires, even though we may not want to admit them. And we may always give people, the right answer. We may be able to win the Awana Award for memorizing scripture. But you can memorize, you can do all of that. You've got to really allow the scriptural way of thinking to become your thinking so that you truly are not of this world. So what we're going to do is this book is going to give us these, they're calling them narratives, these ways that kind of dominate the way we look at the world. I want you to write each one down, the very brief definition they give for each one. And then your job is going to be to find how Christianity would be the answer to what would be the different answer, the different narrative Christianity would provide for each one of these areas. All right. So here we go. We're going to call them narratives. Narrative number 1, right? So they're like, if you look into the world, you're going to see these different narratives that people kind of have to kind of explain life or try to give them some idea, identity or belonging or purpose. All right. The first one is, materialism. Materialism is a narrative that sometimes people, it impacts the way they think and how they see. And they define materialism as this: I am what I have. You find meaning, you find identity, you find purpose in what you own. Materialism is where you find, are you ready for this? It's, I am what I have. So you find meaningful identity, belonging, and purpose in what you have, in materialism. So in materialism, you find identity, belonging, and purpose in what you have. In materialism, I am what I have. I am what I have. So you find meaningful identity, belonging, and purpose Found in materialism, meaning you would say something like this: I am what I have. Now, you would never say it that way, but how much of your thinking is that? I am what I have. Come on. How much? Okay, I want you to think about this. All right. Now, you may argue, say, no. I do not allow materialism to be the narrative that defines my life. I am not materialistic. No way. I don't find my identity, my purpose, or my belonging in what I have. I would never say I am what I have. I would never say that. Okay. All right. I don't know what you drive. But I want you to do this. I want you to get rid of your car. And I want you to buy a car that looks horrible. It's got some weird looking paint job. Maybe one of the side windows is knocked out and it's got like a garbage bag over it. It's the tire rims are missing. It's all scratched up. It's dented in. It just looks like, whoa. And you know, when people drive by that, they're like, wow, what is that? And I want you to stay with that car. Now, you can go ahead and put a window in it. That's just for, comfort and where you're not freezing to death or burning up, right? And I want you to drive that. And I want you to drive around. I want you to pull up in church. I want everyone to see it. I want to make sure you don't go hide. Come on, loud and proud. Come on, take your kids to school in it. Your kids will be like, this is embarrassing. What are you doing? This is embarrassing. Now, I actually don't do that because I don't want you to embarrass them because they're not a part of your agenda. But you drive it around and just see how much of it actually impacts you. Now, some of you may be sitting there going, it wouldn't impact me at all. Others, it would probably impact more than others. But come on, admit it. Now, I'll never forget this because when I was stationed off at Air Force Base, I worked at Erling-Berquist Hospital. Regional hospital. The hospital wasn't even located on the military base. And my friend, his car, he was involved in a wreck, and his car got messed up. It looked bad. It looked like, I'm just going to say, it looked like a piece of junk. And I'm like, man, what are you going to do? Are you going to do something with this? And I'll never forget where it's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, why not? He's like, because this is embarrassing. It's humiliating to drive around in this thing. It's absolutely embarrassing. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, well, I think spiritually that tells me that I am finding my purpose, my identity, and what I have. I am what I have. I am what I have. I am, in a sense, this car. So he was like, I'm going to go against this so it will humble me and humiliate me so that I don't see myself as I am what I have, that I'm not finding my identity, my belonging, or my purpose in my car. And I was like, there was a part of me, it was like, dude, that's convicting. There was another part of me like, well, I'm glad I don't have that problem. I'm glad I don't have that problem. Now, I've never been one to find much identity in my car. I haven't. I really don't care. Like, I'm not into cars. I don't care. So my car, I always buy the cheap car. But even to me, even someone for me who really literally don't care, there's been a few times. One of the doctors I worked with, he was from Pakistan. And he was going back to his home country. And so he let me say, he's like, here's my car. You just take care of it. You can drive it. And I'm like, okay. And I think it was like a BMW. It was some really nice car. And I remember driving it around, and a few times people were like, wow, that's a really nice car. And I'm like, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I think so too. Yeah. Now I didn't care enough to then ever want to put money into getting a car like that. Not that I could have ever afforded one, but it made me realize, man, you could get used to this, right? It's kind of like I don't know how it is for females, but there was a time, at least in my mind, because teenage guys would always say this, hey, the way to get the girl's attention is you've got to have the nice car. You have the nice car, and all of a sudden, Susan over there is never giving you the time of day. We'll be like, oh, hey, how are you doing? You're like, now maybe she just wants to ride somewhere. But the point is, sometimes you whatever you own, you can become what you own. You want your house to look good. Why? Does how your house look? Does it change who you are? But there's a part of us, I am what I have. I am what I have. So, and material, that's a narrative that we look, we're supposed to be not of this world, but materialism, we think like this world far more than we want to. Oh, I've seen people do this with churches. Oh, come on now. Hey, down the street, there's a church. The preaching is very good. It's biblical. They got sound doctrine. They got good theology. But man, it's like a little storefront building. It's kind of embarrassing to even look at. You're probably not going to want people to know that you're even going there. They're going to think you're probably in some cult. But there's another church down the street. Not quite as good doctrine. Very watered down. Kind of theologically questionable. But look at that building. When you drive up there, you can drive up there and you can hold up your head high. Now Christians would be like, I would never make a decision like that. Never. It's just that the other church is just, okay, you talk a big game, but you sometimes have to ask yourself, do you buy into the narrative of materialism where you are what you have? And look, this doesn't have to be rich people. It can be people who don't have money. It can be people who don't have money. I definitely did not come from a rich family in any way, shape, or form. I did not. I'll tell you, this is all confession time for me. So I go to basic training, Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas. And then I take off to technical school, Shepherd Air Force Base, Wichita Falls, Texas. And I had a friend at the Lutheran church I was attending. There was a friend that I had there who he sometimes let me use his car. And I got to use his car, I don't know, a number of times. And it was a really nice car. I don't remember what kind of car it was. It was really nice. And I really liked the way, just feeling it made me feel like awesome. And so I got to use it quite a bit. Well, when we were in class one day, I don't know what we were talking about. Someone started talking about, I think because we all ended up at Shepherd Air Force Base, for tech school. And a few people were able to drive there with their cars, but a lot of people were there. We had no cars. We had no transportation. So because we were there for a training base, most every place you had to go, you were marching anyway. You couldn't really drive your car until you got to like a certain phase. And then I think you could drive off base, but most of the time you couldn't drive anywhere. So it really didn't matter if you had your car or not, but a couple of people had their cars. And so they would talk about they had their cars and they would say what kind of car they had, what kind of car they had. So everyone's going around talking about what kind of car they had. Now I could have told them the kind of car I had, which I think at that point was just some old pickup truck that I was using. I can't even remember what I had at the time. But I did not. You know what I said? I said the car that my friend had. That's the car. That's the car. I told them that was mine. And they were like, whoa, you've got one of those. I don't remember what kind of car. They were like, wow, that's really cool. And I was like, yeah, see, everybody thinks I'm cool, right? Because I don't want people to know that I'm, really, not from I'm from more of a poor family. I didn't want people to really know that. I wanted to be known for the car, right? Now I'm a Christian at the time. I'm not of this world. And I'm not of this world because, I'm not going out and getting drunk. See, when everyone gets their chance to go out, I don't drink. So I'm not of this world. They're doing these things. I don't do this. See, I'm not of this world. But guess what? I was very much like this world because the narrative, I am what I have, I was being just that. So this is how messed up it was. So I said that thinking, well, it's never going to matter, right? It's never going to matter because, nobody's ever going to know, right? Well, then all of a sudden, it came time that my brother was going to come and see me, right? My brother was going to come and see me. And I wasn't even thinking about it. And they're like, oh, so your brother's coming to see me? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, how is he getting here? I'm like, well, he's using my car. I'm like, oh. And as soon as I said that, I was like, oh, stupid. I told everyone I have this certain kind of car. What am I going to do? So I'm like, I panicked. I was like, what do I do? So I waited. And as I got closer into the week, I came into class and I did this. Just telling the truth. I came into class like, oh man, and acting all upset. And I'm like, what's wrong? I'm like, my brother wrecked my car. And so I had to put on this big act Like my car got hurt. So when he shows up in a piece of junk, see, that's just the car he had to use because he wrecked my car. Like, how stupid was that? How stupid was that? Because materialism, I am what I have. Because I didn't want my identity to be, I wanted my identity, and that shouldn't have been my identity. See, I'm not of this world, and there were a lot of external things that I wanted to look different and sound different because I'm a Christian. But guess where it's different? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down materialism. Okay, I want you to write down materialism, and I want you to write down finding identity, belonging, and purpose in what you have. And then you can just write down this phrase, I am what I have. And I want you to put down, so on one side of the page, you can take a piece of paper and divide it, put materialism, write down that definition, make sure you have that phrase, I am what I have. And then on the other side, put Christianity at the top. And then what is Christianity's response to materialism? What is the Christian narrative and response to materialism? You can put Christian response to materialism. What is the Christian response to materialism? Materialism is I am what I have. What I have somehow, it's my identity, it's my purpose, it's my meaning. What is the Christian answer to that? You can write down scriptures that offer a counter narrative. So because you need to not think like the world. Right? So there's materialism. Right? I am what I have. Second, narrative. Consumerism. I am meant to acquire. Materialism, I am what I have. The next one is very much connected to it. Consumerism, I am meant to acquire. I am meant to acquire. You find identity, you find meaning, you find purpose in acquiring things, working to get things, working to obtain things, because this is going to be very much related to I am what I have. Well, if you are what you have, you're going to have to try to get more of it. How much time and money and effort is spent in getting, not in giving, but in getting. You are what you are, or as it states here, that you are meant to acquire. You find meaning in acquiring things, purchasing things. How much does consumerism? Now, materialism, I can relate much more to it. And the reason I spent so much time on materialism is because I didn't come from a wealthy background in any way, shape, or form. The opposite of. And yet materialism played a part in me to some level. And now, many cases I did not feel it, but then there would be these very specific situations where I was clearly finding I am what I have. Consumerism, acquire things. Now, there's times maybe I would almost act like I was meant to acquire. Now, I don't know. I don't know if I have as much issue with consumerism, but I want you to contrast consumerism, again, where you're finding your meaning, your purpose, and your identity, and those things that you acquire. You're finding and trying to acquire things. And again, the phrase you write down for consumerism, I am meant to acquire. I am meant to acquire. And I want you to write that down. And then on the other side of the page, what's the Christian answer to consumerism? I want you to write down scriptures. I want you to really think it through. What is the Christian answer to consumerism? What is it? Again, you can tell yourself, I am not of this world. And you're just trying to avoid many cases, these external things. This gets to the deeper reality of it. We are to think differently. All right? So the first one was materialism. The second one was consumerism. The third one, perfectionism. I am what I do. Perfectionism. I am what I do. My identity, my belonging, my purpose is found in what I do. And I must do it perfectly, because if I don't, then my identity, my meaning, and my purpose will be that I am a loser. How much has perfectionism become a narrative in your life? Now, materialism, I can relate. Consumerism, maybe not as much. There's not always a lot of things I want to acquire. I always have specific things I want to acquire. Obviously, stereo equipment. I've always wanted to acquire that, right? Always. So I always get the best that I can at any given time because I absolutely love music. And then I use it. Books, comic books. I do like having a nice television there. So there's a few things, but then but once I kind of get what I want, I'm usually pretty good and I don't really need a lot. There's just specific things. So, but then does my identity get attached to those things I have? See, so yeah, materialism, consumerism. All right. There's a little bit of that. I can relate to those, but perfectionism may actually be the narrative that has probably stayed with me the longest. We could talk about how that narrative was imposed upon me in certain ways. Now, this one, I'm now, and all of these, I'm somewhat inconsistent in all of these. And I think it's true of all of us, right? I don't think in any one of these narratives that becomes we're human beings. We're very complex and there's multiple layers to us. But this perfectionism very much became a part of me. I am what I do. So for me, now this would only show up in certain ways because you would think perfectionism would impacted every area of my life. But I think in the areas where it did not impact, I did what I could to try to dismiss it so I didn't have to worry about it. But all right, so let me explain. So first, it showed up in sports. I played sports, but I didn't play sports like other people. I played sports to win. And if I did not win, I lost my ever living mind. I've told the story multiple times, playing, baseball as a young kid, young kid, right? I mean, you're talking, first grade, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, baseball. And I'm out there and I'm playing, and immediately while on the baseball diamond, I start acting, the fool, right? I start getting mad at these other kids because I'm like, they're no good. I don't want them. So I'm doing things like literally, like I'm in the outfield, but if they're going to throw the ball to second base, I know that kid on second base is not going to be able to get. So I would knock the kid out of the way. I would try to just knock kids out of the way. Like I'm going to play every position on the entire baseball diamond. I know it's ridiculous, but that's how I was. I'm like, we have to win. Losing is not, and if you, and those kids were out there, they're just wanting to have fun. I'm yelling and screaming at them. I'm getting in trouble. It's just a bad situation. And we lost. I could take you to the field where it occurred because it became a story. It became a story of legend for me growing up. We come off the baseball diamond. We're supposed to say good game to the other team. I refuse to shake anyone's hand because how is it a good game? If you lose, it's not a good game. Now I'm little. This is already so ingrained in my brain. So we come out. And they're like, we've got snacks. And they had ice chests with drinks. And I don't even remember what was in it. And I got mad. So I went and started throwing everything out of the ice chest. And I tipped the ice chest over. I'm like, we do not deserve snacks if we lost. I am what I do. And I did not do what I was trying to do, which is win a game. Therefore, I'm a loser. And so then I absolutely, I lost it. And that stayed true. It did not care if it was an organized game. It did not care if it was a backyard football game. It did not care if it was a basketball game at the local gym. It did not matter what I was doing. I was going to win, and I was going to let the world know that I was winning. I was going to talk trash because my identity became, I am what I do. My winning was everything. And that stayed with me in so many, but there were other areas where I wasn't so successful. There were other areas where I was not doing, in certain areas of school, I was not doing so well, right? Academically, there was lots of reasons for it. Definitely was not doing well in mathematics. Definitely there were other areas I was excelling in, others I wasn't. And guess what my attitude was? If I felt like I couldn't do it, well, that was going to greatly impact my identity, my purpose, my meaning in life. So guess what I would be? That's not important. That's stupid. That's idiotic. That's foolish. Who would want to do that? Who cares about doing that? Why would I even want to do that? That's dumb. I'm not going to give it any of my attention. I'm not going to get any of my effort. Anyone who's good at this is just an idiot anyway, because that's why they're good at it, because this is for stupid people. So I had to protect myself, right? Because you can't be perfect at everything, so you can lose your mind. And then I would go pour myself into the other areas where I think I could excel in, right? So sports. Now, kind of once I reached a point where I kind of realized, as good as I was at some sports, and I was really good at a lot of things, certain things started, certain realities started, to come into to frame, right? I wasn't going to ever be over 5'6", and at that point, I was, if I was going to be over 130 and 140 pounds, I would be like, woo, I don't know if I'm ever even going to get there. So as good as I was at sports, it became just obvious, you're not going to the NBA, okay? You're not going to be playing in the NFL. Like, it's just your limitations. And I kind of picked up on those limitations to some degree. Now, even though I kind of gave up maybe a hope or a dream of some professional sport, still any sport I participated in, I still was going to be the best. I still was going to be the best and still was going to win. But are you ready for what happened? Here's where the story gets messed up. I became a Christian. And guess what happened? I completely misunderstood the entire gospel, because I turned Christianity into now the new world where my perfectionism could rule and reign. Because guess what I was going to do? Now, I am what I do. I am what I do. So now Christianity became this new world where I felt like I had biblical justification to make it about what I do. What I do. I'm going to read my Bible more than you. I'm going to study more than you. I'm going to know theology more than you. I'm going to know this. I'm going to do this. Oh, you missed church on Sunday night? I'm going to get here early on Sunday night and I'm going to do discipleship class. Oh, you're going to leave after church? I'll stay and pray for 2 hours. Oh, you're going to do this? I'm going to skip school, break into the church, and I'm going to read and study my Bible. Oh, we have Sunday school curriculum. I'm going to know it forwards and backwards. I'm going to answer every question in Sunday school, and I'm going to make you look stupid because you don't know the answer. You're not even a Christian. You don't even care about God. You don't even love God. I pray more. I read more. I go to church more. I listen to more. I know more. I was going to be the best Christian there could be. I was going to be the perfect Christian. I was never going to sin. Everyone else, they were doing these things because they were weak and they didn't care. I was going to show them how to be the best Christian you could ever be. And then I discovered a theology known as lordship. And at this time, I didn't know it was called lordship. I didn't really understand I thought it was Christianity. I'm like, okay, see, the problem with these other people, they're not really Christians. They're not. I completely forgot saved by grace alone, through faith alone, because of Christ alone. I know it was about doing, because doing, that's who I was. My identity, my purpose, my whole everything became based on what I do. Christianity became the sports field where I could excel and exceed everyone else. And guess what? I started having some struggles. And I started having some struggles because I realized I kept sinning and I kept sinning and I could not understand, why was I still sinning? Why was I still sinning? And I would confess and I would pray. Okay. And I would read every book. Okay. How to stop sinning, how to do this, how to do that. And I kept sinning and I kept sinning and I kept realizing everyone else kept sinning. And I struggled and I struggled and I struggled and I tried to figure out and I tried to navigate it and I tried to understand it and I tried to understand it theologically. And I would give myself the lordship test and try to convince myself I was passing this test in some meaningful way. But more and more that I studied, and more that I began to experience and realize my own frailty and my own sin, and the more that I messed up, and the more that I failed, and the more that I hurt the name of Christ, and I hurt other people, and the more stupidity that was shown in my life, and sin, I reached a point that I did not know what I was going to do. I did not understand. And then finally, when I felt the weight of the law and was broken under it, I began to realize, no. Christianity is not about perfection in me. Christianity is about me acknowledging my imperfection and resting and trusting in the perfection of Christ. Now, in some ways, that had great, profound impact on me. because it kind of took away, in a sense, my identity. Instead of my identity being in, and I'm trying to be very careful in giving the answers to some of these. I was like, if Christianity is not about me doing, then I am what I do. I'm no longer what I do. If it's not I am what I do, then where is my identity? What is my purpose? Where do I belong? If I'm not what I do, then what is it? I don't understand it. So as I was struggling with it theologically, in some ways, I replaced trying to figure it out how it worked in Christianity, because in Christianity, I was still struggling with it, and I didn't have any answers. I just knew that I kept sinning and I kept messing up and I kept, humiliating myself before God. And I just know, okay, I still couldn't figure that out. So a lot of it, where I poured it out, I found a new place. You know where I found it? Broadcasting. Oh, I'm going to do more hours of live broadcasting, more than any other pastor, more than any other church. And I'm going to do it perfectly. So I've told the story countless times. It was a horrible, dark time in my life, a horribly dark time in my life. And for everyone who witnessed it here, it's probably done irreparable damage to them. But I would be in a room going, okay, everyone, good evening. It is Friday. And if I made one mistake, I wasn't live, I was recording. So if I made one mistake, I would stop and go, okay, I'm going to do that again. All right, delete, start again. Good afternoon, good evening. It is, wait, I need to say one. Is it good afternoon? Is it good? Okay, start, delete, do it again. Do it over, take one, take two, take three. And I'm deleting everything and starting over. I would get 30 minutes into one, make a mistake, delete it, start over. 40 minutes, stop, over and 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 over, almost this obsessive. I have to be perfect because I am what I do. I am what I do. And then it started getting so bad that when I would make a mistake, I would slap myself. I would slap myself. I would slap myself. I'd slap myself, and I would slap myself over and over again. In fact, and then the slap, I would take a closed fist and hit the side of my head until I'd be bruised. I know it sounds totally insane, because I was what I do. The numbers for the broadcast, I moved my perfectionism from sports to Christianity to then broadcasting. I am what I do. So now what I try to do is, one, I don't ever want to go back to recording because that's not good, but I do live broadcasts. And when I make mistakes, I do everything in my power. Oh, it is so hard. I leave them there. It is humiliating. It makes me mad. I'll say something incorrect. Like if you listen to the one I did on experiencing the depths of Jesus Christ, Madame Guyon, I completely messed up. I don't remember the name of the name of the individual, but I completely said the name incorrect, and someone had to correct me from the pew. They had to correct me, which I'm grateful they did. Francois. And when I looked at it, and right, it was, it didn't look like Francois, it looked like Francosis or whatever it looks like. And I completely said it incorrect. Should have known that it was a French name. I should have messed it up. Guess what? I left it there. And sometimes I'll get comments, maybe on YouTube, maybe in an email. You said this incorrect. You said this wrong. You said this. You said that. And you know what? You just have to, you got to, even though I don't like it, because I am not what I do. That's to me, that's not a Christian worldview. So, materialism. I am what I have. Consumerism. I am meant to acquire. Perfectionism. I am what I do. I want you to write down, perfectionism is where you find your purpose, your meaning, your identity, your belonging, and what you do. That is perfectionism to some level. Now, what is the Christian response to perfectionism? What is the Christian response to materialism? What is the Christian response to consumerism? What is the Christian response to perfectionism? Next, rationalism. I am the final word. Rationalism. I am the final word. rationalism. I am the final word. Now, I'm gonna look this up. I'm gonna look up a deeper definition for rationalism. I'm going to find a deeper definition for rationalism. Rationalism is a view that regards reason as the chief source and the test of knowledge of any view appealing to reason. So your reason, that is the chief source of knowledge, your reason. So, and rationalism, guess what the focus is? I am the final word. You see yourself as the final word. You are the one who determines right and wrong. We could get to morality, but you see yourself as the final word. You're the final word. Even though you may not try to articulate it in and all of these, you may not articulate materialism in such a bold and explicit way. You may not speak or speak of consumerism in such a bold or direct way, or perfectionism in such a bold and direct way. But these three things enter in your mind and they become a narrative. And and Christianity is in contrast to these. So I want you to have materialism, consumerism, perfectionism, and rationalism. And what is Christianity's response to each one of them? Rationalism is where you're going around going, you're the final word. Now, you may never tell everyone you're the final word, but how often do you always think you're right? How often do you think your view is the right view? How often do you condemn every other view? Oh, this is a lot. Comes from my perfectionism a little. I think perfectionism and rationalism kind of go hand in hand. So there's rationalism. I want to spend more time with these, but I can't believe we're already at 51 minutes. So we may have to come back to these. All right. So there's rationalism. I am the final word. Stoicism. So the next one is Stoicism. So we have materialism, consumerism, perfectionism, rationalism, Stoicism. I am unaffected by you. I am unaffected by you. Stoicism is a philosophy that, I'm going to be stoic here. I'm not impacted or moved by anyone else. Now we'll get a more proper definition of Stoicism. Let's get a more proper definition of Stoicism. Here we go. Stoicism is a Greek school of philosophy. It's taught that virtue, the highest good, is based on knowledge. The wise live in harmony with the divine reason. Okay, well, it goes into a lot of different here's. We'll go with it according to this book. The idea of being stoic or stoicism, holding to a stoicistic kind of philosophy is, hey, I'm not impacted by you. Myself, and I'm not impacted by you. Now, how would Christianity, there's a lot of ways we could go with this. I'm a little concerned with here because I think that's maybe an oversimplification of Stoicism. But the idea they want you is you're unaffected by anybody else. You're unaffected. You're not impacted by anybody else. Now, in some ways, I kind of admire this idea of being stoic and not moved by everybody else, right? Because I'm not impacted by you. I'm not affected by, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm not impacted by you. In some ways, I celebrate that. But I think you could see that there could become a negative aspect to that, right? That you're not impacted or affected by other people's pain or suffering, right? Then that could be a negative side of it. So here are these narratives. We have materialism. We have consumerism. We have perfectionism. We have rationalism. We have stoicism. Stoicism is where your identity, your belonging, your purpose is found in the fact that you are unaffected, that I am unaffected by you, that you're unaffected by other people. Okay? What would be Christianity in contrast to that? Next, romanticism. Romanticism, I am my emotions. Romanticism is I am my emotions. I am my emotions. How frequently do your emotions, you find your purpose, your belonging, your meaning in how you feel? It's feeling, emotion. That's romanticism. What is the Christian answer to that? I got to go through some of these quickly, all right? We're almost down to the end here, all right? So let's go through them. Materialism, I am what I have. Consumerism, I am meant to acquire. Perfectionism, I am what I do. Rationalism, I am the final word. Stoicism, I am unaffected by you. Romanticism, I am my emotions. Your identity, your belonging, your purpose is determined by how you feel. What is the Christian answer to all of these? Next, hedonism. Hedonism, I am my greatest pleasure. Hedonism is, I am my greatest pleasure. You find your purpose, you find your meaning, you find your identity in pleasure. Now, we as Christians, we never would want to say, oh, I find my purpose and meaning in pleasure. But how much of your life is lived according to getting that pleasure? You find that pleasure, that pleasure. That's hedonistic. What is the Christian answer to hedonism? Again, materialism, I am what I have. Consumerism, I am meant to acquire. Perfectionism, I am what I do. Rationalism, I am the final word. Stoicism, I am unaffected by you. Romanticism, I am my emotions. Hedonism, I am my greatest pleasure. And then last, postmodernism, I am what I say I am. I am what I say I am. Now, these identities, these narratives, they shape us early in life because before we can name those things, before we can name materialism, before we can name consumerism, before we can name perfectionism, before we can name rationalism, before we can name stoicism, before we can name romanticism, before we can name hedonism, before we can name postmodernism, these things shape us early because before we can name them, we feel them. They help us make sense of the world. And in many of these, they have pulled us into believing that into them, and we start trying to make sense of the world according to those narratives. And we have to reorient ourselves with God's narrative, God's reality, which is contradictory to all of those. So I want you, on one hand, I want you to write down on one side of the page, materialism, I am what I have. Consumerism, I am meant to acquire. Perfectionism, I am what I do. Rationalism, I am the final word. Stoicism, I am unaffected by you. Romanticism, I am my emotions. Hedonism, I am my greatest pleasure. Postmodernism, I am what I say I am. And on the other side of the page, I want the Christian answer to all of them. And for every one of these, remember, you're finding identity, belonging, or purpose in these things. Whereas Christianity, we should not be finding our identity or our belonging or our purpose in materialism. In fact, we should think how when it comes to materialism, when it comes to consumerism, when it comes to perfectionism, when it comes to rationalism, when it comes to romanticism, hedonism, and postmodernism. What is the Christian answer to each one of these? And find a scripture to back up your answer. Find more than a scripture. Now, if you will really take the time to do this and spend some time looking into your own life and how materialism and consumerism and hedonism and all of these, stoicism and all of these, perfectionism, how they have so been a part of your life, if you can identify how they manifest themselves in your life, see the Christian response, then you're reorienting yourself to God's reality. And slowly but surely, you begin to act like you're not of this world, even though you're in it. Now, I do not like, see, my perfectionism is kicking in here, that I made it to 58 minutes, and many of those we had to go flying through. Now, maybe that's okay, because guess what? I had to spend more time on the ones that are much more real to me, because I could speak to those from experience. All right. Hopefully I made the assignment clear. If I did not, email me, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. I want you to contrast those on paper. You can put them on the refrigerator, right? Materialism. I am what I have. Right? I find my purpose, belonging, my meaning in what I have because I am what I have. What's the Christian response to it? You come up with a pithy, short statement that's in contrast to the little short statement to define materialism, and then have 3, 4, 5 scriptures listed. And go through the next one, consumerism. I am meant to acquire. Perfectionism, I am what I do. Rationalism, I am the final word. Stoicism, I'm unaffected by you. Romanticism, I am my emotions. Hedonism, I am my greatest pleasure. And postmodernism, I am what I say I am. All those are contrary to God's reality. And when those things become the narrative that control and dominate your life, and you find your purpose and meaning in them, you're not acting like someone who's not of this world. You're acting very much as someone in the world. And I don't care how well you clean up the outside. That way of thinking is contrary. All right, email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Thanks for listening. God bless.